Thank you for being here on Valentine's Day. I used to work on a dating site once, and I would not have been able to go to a meetup during the Valentine's Day because I probably would have been attending to some servers that were on fire. So I'm going to talk about the ops gap and a case for building ops jobs in your organization. This could mean a lot of things, there are a lot of gaps, there are a lot of different things. I'm going to focus on this interesting gap between production and development. So I work at a company called Architizer. We are an online community, leading online resource for architects. And we, through our building database, bridge the communication between architects and building manufacturers. So I've been at a lot of different startups, and they're all very different except from one thing, which is this problem. We have like a huge gap between people, like this is like the server dude and this is like the development guy, and he's like, yo, can you deploy my code? And the other guy is like, your code sucks and it doesn't work. And then the developer has a solution already. It's just like, install the latest version on Node, right? Now the site is down. What does your code even do? Well, it's an algorithm. It's super cool, and it runs perfectly on my laptop. There goes my weekend. So this is real. Like this has happened like a lot of times. I've both like heard this sort of like works on my laptop, and I've used it. It works on my laptop. The nice thing is, and I'll get to it a little later, is that this statement works on my laptop. It's almost becoming true. Like we're so close to it, and that's where like one of the gaps. And this gap sort of it all has history, all has like legacy, all has we didn't like all of a sudden start like working in startups and coding and making websites and doing all these things. It all kind of has to do with deadlines and how how we think about deadlines. Because if you had you have an idea, you have design, you have UX, like what should this do? You have product considerations other than the coding, and then you're deploying. All this stuff here, oops, I should have used this. All this stuff here takes up like all the time. And then, you're ready to deploy. You just like throw it over the wall and go and deploy this thing. It's very common. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been in between those conversations like, like the developer's like, the code is ready. And the operations folks are like, give me the code. Like, where is it? How should it run? So this is like an obvious like false stuff. This is like waterfall stuff, if you want to use topics that will come up a lot. And, operations tend to be the last one in the line. So in startups, you have different dynamics, because oftentimes you don't have dedicated ops. But operation concerns sometimes get pushed down in priority because of the same thing we talked about before. So we need to change the culture of like how you make products. Like, and one way to change it is to not think about like a feature that you're launching, but rather like, what are you doing today, and do that every day, do that like week after week after week, and always be pushing things and trying to get a culture of just deploying. And to do that, you need to bridge this gap so the engineers aren't the engineers. Those are the people that will code it, deploy it, in some cases fix code changes, they copy changes and other things. And this, use the beam again. This is super important to get this efficiency right, and the challenges are to like communicate that in startups, because big companies understand this, and that's why like the whole DevOps culture comes about. In big business, it often translates directly into dollars and cents. In startups, when you're still trying to prove out your idea, it's a little bit more fussy. Like being inefficient doesn't necessarily directly like impact your bottom line. So that's another gap. Like the culture, the writings, and all the literature about DevOps and this and that doesn't always apply to startups. So like you can't just like hire a DevOps person. That's not like a job title. It's a culture. And So what do we do as engineers to solve this? Like, we're all responsible. We're not just coders and code away. We are responsible for making this a better world for our business sake. Starts with communication. You really, 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 really need to nail down on the communication. In order to do that super, super well, you need to know and be able to communicate problems. You need to communicate them well. You need to know them well. You need to understand the business problems. You need to understand the design challenges. You need to understand, like, be curious about everything that everyone does. About the business, wait, is this again? Design process, about the backend, front database, and ops. Like, you need to know all this stuff. If you're in a startup, like, this is daunting stuff. Like, this is super important. Like, you need to at least have rudimentary understanding of, like, all of these things fit together. You can't know everything about the stack, but there's, like, certainly no harm in trying, except for Burnout. Just, this is real. Like, you know, startups, like, you could literally work 28 hours a day, easy. And, you know, focus on, like, the day to day, not like I just wasted a weekend because I was working on something. Like, really focus on working hard every day, every day of the week. This is also important to show, like, empathy for people with different knowledge or specialties. We're all engineers here. We often fall into the trap of, like, marketing this, sales that, you know, product this, design that. Like, we need to, like, all, like, level set. We're all in this together. There's no code to be written without marketing. There's no code to be written without someone selling something. There's no code to be written, like, the problem wouldn't be there if it weren't for these people that make the business. Like, we're all, like, in a group that we make the business together, and us as engineers, we just, like, step up and lead the way with this. And assume good intentions and communicate, you know, differences. Like, that's really, really powerful stuff. And then, you know, any debate, anything that comes up, it's all about priorities. Like, have all the priorities of everyone in the company, just throw them in a, you know, big pile, and pick up the first one, pick up the next one, and so on and so forth. So, all that stuff, let's focus on, like, what engineers can do for a really good culture that bridges the gap. Let's create a blameless culture. This is super important. Like, I once used to work at this place. It was actually the first time when I was an engineer. You know, we would deploy code, servers went down, and the operations lead would, like, bring these, like, clown shoes and, like, slap them on your table. Like, no one wanted that. And, like, like, we probably didn't do as many bugs, but, like, no, that's like a terrible, terrible, terrible culture to have. And being afraid and rational is not exactly what we're good at as human beings. Like, if you're afraid, you would do more things and you'll be even afraider, and then, like, things will go really, really bad quickly. So another thing that is super important in startups, like, do your work in a way where, you know, engineering is not the bottleneck. Like, if there are people that need stuff for engineering, like, try to eliminate that need. You know, ask these questions. Can everyone access the data safely to make business decisions? Can everyone safely deploy copy changes? Can designers safely push out, like, tweaks? If you do these things, it's really, really powerful. And it saves, in the end, a lot of time for engineers. Like, being able to have people consume their own data and make business decisions without, hey, you know, can you patch the records for X last couple of days? Like, you never have to hear that because it's just there. Then, you know, of course, when you have to do something like that, you should absolutely automate everything you find yourself doing more than once. Automate it right away, even before. Well, not before, but when you find yourself doing something for the second time, absolutely automate it. Automate the deploys, automate backups, automate server provisioning, and create an automated infrastructure. And here we come onto another sort of catchphrase, things that we're, you know, as engineers, also we like so much. Infrastructure as code. This is how you go fast. Like, if all your servers are just sitting in your GitHub repository, you're like, oh no, server A went down. No problem, build it again. This is really powerful stuff, and this is me typing. So we have lots of options for these things. I don't know like how many here are do server deployment or other things. There's lots of different options and tons of names out there. There's, they all have to do with cooking or storing stuff. There's Chef, there's Puppet, there's Ansible, there's SaltStack, there's Terraform. So you guys know what Terraform is? It's this thing where you just literally write out exactly what your entire like AWS infrastructure looks like. Security groups, load balancers, servers, everything. It's magic, right? I never used it. CloudFormation, which I have used, is terrible. Packer, which is a way to like you can build your servers, like you can make it build Docker images and an AMI on Amazon and lots of other providers through Docker. All great tools that allow you to create infrastructure with code. This is good stuff. We know how to write code. We're all set, right? Pick one of these things and just dive in. Like start small and just like try to roll out and just like pick small and like encapsulate it and then grow. Like don't try to like half automate your entire thing. That's worse than no automation at all. But just because we know how to write code, like do we actually know what the code should do? Like this is one of the gaps, is that a lot of people using Chef will often complain about like Chef is horrible, this and that. Like oftentimes it isn't even Chef. Chef is not often culprit. Sometimes it's just like lack of like Linux or system administration, because not everyone like we all have Macs. We some of us have tried to run Linux on laptops for years, and finally I decided I wanted to print, so I bought a Mac. But other people like have never like had a Linux machine. Like, and this is not like easy stuff, but it's totally something that everyone can learn though. Or problems, it's usually a typo. Here are some other observations from startups. I don't know if you've seen this, where there's like a machine, there's a magical machine, everyone like hops onto the machine, they do an SSH, they have maybe a password, they don't even do it with keys, and then everyone does from it. Like, this is a terrible, terrible pattern. Like this is very common in startups. Like having this sort of like machines that someone built and like you have access to it and great. Like, as any Linux administration guy, person would like really like launch at you if you did that. Systems are out of date, that goes without saying. Snowflake Service, those are my favorite. The service where like it's too hard to automate things, it's too hard to build these things. So we just launch an AMI and do apt sudo get like this and that and install this and that. Like that's great like on day 1, day 2, day 3. 3 months into it, you have a real genuine Snowflake on your hand and you have no idea what's on there. And it's going to take a lot of work to figure out what. Having repeatable servers is amazing. Even better if they're totally discardable. Like having web servers, you can just like, oh, don't need that one, build another one. That really brings your nights and weekends back. That's like amazing. Except if you have data that needs to persist, and that's sort of like push it to later. You can use like a PaaS service, a platform as a service for that. Engineers using production data on their laptops, like I'm sure many of you have had at least one experience in the past where this was the case. Like this is bad stuff, like, and we need to communicate like to business and everyone in the organization, like this is not something you can do. Like you should really make sure that this doesn't happen. Networking, firewall mess, like security groups in AWS, they are easy to configure. You open up a port, you close a port, you do this and that, and like soon you will have 30 security groups. You have no idea what the blast radius is if you delete one of them. You should try it though. This stuff is easy to solve too. Like AWS has the Soho office. Hop in there, talk to them about VPCs, talk to them about how to like make all the servers just like internally be friendly, and then expose maybe like 80 and 443 on the load balancer, and maybe if you needed like SSH to your internal office. Like this is not like hard stuff if you ask the right people, and everyone's willing to help. But more importantly, you can solve these as a team, and you're engineers, like not everyone is as advanced in these things. Focus on the business and the value risks, and communicate them clearly. Work together as a team. How many have read this book? 2 people. This is a really, really amazing book. It talks about the enterprise. It talks about someone who was like promoted into a leadership role, and they had this like project that was like total, disaster. And the book is basically set up as a novel where he just goes in and he's like tries to pluck things apart and like really solves the problem. And the end solution is like reduce like single point of failures in terms of like people, and getting everyone in the same room, and focus on like the burning stuff, like what is happening today that is a problem that we can fix right away. And then, I mean, obviously they automated everything became wonderful, and this is sort of the DevOps Bible? No, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't say it's like the Bible for DevOps, but it's definitely one of the key things. There's lots of magic out there. There's the cloud. That's magical. There's containers. Everything fits nicely. This is what our servers look like. They fit all like really nicely together. And then you have platforms as a service. This is super important. This is Heroku. Like, if you can run your business on Heroku, like, do it. Absolutely. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Assuming that you know that your business is never going to grow out of it, and that you have a like local development workflow that is great for the engineers. But this is really powerful stuff. And when you have something like Heroku and other things, you have this paradox that's like technology becoming more accessible at the same time where we're getting like less exposure to it. More and more and more engineers that go through their career without ever having a SSD tuned server, like, is totally going to become a thing. So what does that mean for us as engineers? Like, are we able to take advantage of the hardware that we like work with, or the OS, or the different packages and other things? So this is something that we as engineers need to make sure that we keep track of. I love these business graphs. Like Googling for like bridging the gap is a really fun experience. So I have a little like quick Docker, because I really believe that Docker, because I was skeptical and everyone else that I know was skeptical, and then everyone sort of converged on the same point. I really think this is the common language between operations people and developers, because there's differences, but they're a lot less than, say, Chef. Like Chef, I can't even run on my local machine. Like, I can do Vagrant, I can do this and that, but it's not going to be instant, it's not going to be fast, and not going to be like really good. So Docker is really this thing, and you can in your development local environment on your disk and through your IDE, you can develop like a quick like API service. So like obviously you can grow this into doing something useful. Literally you can just, this is going to be a Python machine, then Python 3, you don't install anything. You have these like requirements. This Falcon is just an API server. This is where you map like where your code lives locally, that you can edit and then run through your server. Boot this up. Oh, this is the code. Not very important. Doesn't do demo. Only does demo equals true. And then you do Docker up, and you have a localhost 800 like a demo. Great. And then you can build up upon that, and then you can build like hundreds of these, and then you can do the things where people talk about breaking the monolith. Like you can have 10 web services on your laptop and make sure it all works together. Not saying that you should, but you could. Thank you.
Thank you, Baldur. So time for a couple minutes of Q&A. So, go right ahead.
What are your thoughts on tracking and managing credentials and keys and things like that?
My thoughts do that responsibly, I guess.
Can you repeat the question if you could?
So my thoughts on credentials and passwords and other things, is that keys? Yes, it's keys. The way that I solve it, which is a proxy to an answer, I really like this service called OpsWorks in AWS, which basically is an implementation of like Chef's like standalone, where you provision servers through that mechanism and ties into your AMI credentials. So you boot up servers and they will automatically have any like AMI users that you've declared. And then when you pull those users off, you can provision them Like they will provision automatically. So being responsible and managing that, in a lightweight fashion, where like ideally if you're a startup in some way that you can kind of like buy your way out of it, like that's how I generally like to solve these things. There are always going to be tools to manage that more effectively.
Like database passwords and services, and this stuff floats all over the place, right? It's like, oh, I want to use this, and you tie it to all your microservices.
Yeah. It's hard because you have, first of all, like a lot of these things are going to be in clear text in your code anyway. So if you have access to the service, everyone's going to have access to these things. Using something like LastPass and Melodium or whatever services that you can like embed these passwords or secure like security like the data bags or whatever like Chef has. There's ways to do it, but there's always going to be that step. It's going to be in clear code somewhere. There's going to be some place where you can decode these things and know what it is, and there's going to be a master key. So I don't really have a good answer other than just be careful, and that's sort of like where most of us are.
And if you're just getting started with automating, say, deployment, like what are the first one or two things you should look at as you're just beginning to implement this process in terms of like tools or packages?
Tools. Depending on where you're at, start with Heroku. That's literally just tied into your Git workflow. When you get off of that, just try playing around with Docker is a great way of exercising that. And then once you have Docker, there are other services on AWS that we use, but they're not as good as necessarily OpsWorks. But there's like Elastic Beanstalk. There's offerings on the Google Cloud Services, which is basically hosted Kubernetes, which is a Docker runtime environment, where scheduler they call it, where you basically just drop images on and they run. So like, it's probably my recommendation. I think if you don't have any AWS experience, the Google Cloud is pretty good. It's pretty friendly. It's weird to people who are used to AWS because they're kind of used to the pain of AWS. So there's different kinds of pains in Google, but they're like new and fresher.
So, however, in a startup world, I would say, should you pay attention to monitoring? Because you mentioned you kind of concentrated on building and deployment and security, but what about knowing how to run?
So the nice thing about services like AWS and OpsWorks and other things, they tie a lot of that in like by default. So you can easily make a dashboard of like your events and everything's happening, including memory and other things through CloudWatch. So from that perspective, you should do that immediately. Choose, checking services like Nagios or Sensu. You almost probably should drive that based on like pain or things that are going to be wrong. Like you can have pager, the pingdom to check your like external facing like being up, or you could have HTTP checks like through Nagios like thing. Like it's called Sensu. It's a really nice software. So yeah, I would think the rule of thumb should be do it immediately if you can. The first time you like discover something where there was a problem where you didn't discover it, and some of your users or other people, that's probably the time where you should be like, okay, sure, I should definitely check this. But it's not quite that simple though, since these things take time and there's a learning curve.
Thank you very much. That was terrific.
Thanks for having me.